Day 278 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is another quick update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine today. And as always, I'll start off with the Russian military losses. So as of the 28th of November, so in the last 24-hour reporting period, there has been an additional approximate 590 Russian military losses there. Then when we go down, we'll have a look at the hardware losses. So armored combat vehicles 5, tanks 3, and artillery 2 losses from for the Russian forces there as well. Then we'll move back to the map, and today we'll start out in the Donbass. I'll get rid of that Bayraktar flying around there, and really the northern Donbass, where Ukrainian forces continue to conduct precision strikes on Russian positions, particularly in Svatova. But also in terms of actual forward pushes by the Ukrainian army in the last day, although the map won't yet update and show it, so it still is in red. But right here at Zaitlivka, which was previously Russian occupied, is now in fact a grey zone. And the town is empty too. And that's a grey zone in that no army can claim control, but in the context of it previously being Russian held, it's a push forward for the Ukrainian forces in that way there. Then we move across to nearby Crimea, where in fact the Russian sources themselves reported that Ukrainian units continue to attack Russian defenses in the adjacent forest area. So that's around here by the southwest forest area. So basically Ukrainian forces have scouted them out to be in this area. They do tend to stick around here for the last week or so, and it's well within range of so many Ukrainian weapon systems at the moment. Then at the Bakhmut region, or the town itself, so we'll move across there. Russian forces are also attempting attacks from the northeast of Bakhmut at night. Just to try something new, I guess, but their attempts were repelled devastatingly. In fact, just a few short weeks ago here, the Ukrainian forces pushed back on the northeast Russian forces all the way back to this fairly, somewhat, not really vertical highway there. And all in all, this is truly the region where the largest exhaustion of Russian forces occurs. And I use the term exhaustion diplomatically. Then, somewhere else in the Donbass, though I can't say where, the Ukrainian forces came across a Soviet sickle and hammer statue, which they then proceeded to tear down, not giving that one a second thought. Then we'll move across to the Zaporizhia region. So Russian positions in occupied Poloy or Pulohe, which is indicated by the oinky pig right there, have been targeted all day with Ukrainian heavy artillery. And Russian forces become more and more worried and are starting to really express their concerns about potential Ukrainian offensives in this entire axis, in fact. And I mean, they're probably right to worry. I mean, they're not wrong. As since the recent liberation of Kharkiv in the north and Kherson in the south, the army is looking to switch it up to start offensives. And I suspect places like Mariupol and Melitopol would be some of the first, particularly Melitopol, cities that would actually become liberated by the Ukrainian forces at some point. Oh, now also in the Zaporizhia region, so Enerhodar. Now, in a potential switch of gears for the Russian forces, the head of Energoatom, which is the nuclear power plant operator in Ukraine, said that the Russian forces may be preparing to withdraw from the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, a location that the Russian forces have occupied since March this year, really the beginning of the war. And the signs that suggest that the Russian forces are preparing to leave the power plant include packing up equipment and, you guessed it, looting anything they can basically find of value at the plant. Such a classic Russian mindset or state of play there. And to add to that, there's even Russian media news outlets starting to peddle the narrative that Russia no longer needs to occupy the power plant, thereby warming up regular Russian citizens, really up to the idea that it's an expected outcome. And this has happened before, where Russian media portrays a likely potential outcome of a future, not a great looking one from a Russian stance, just to get the Russian civilian, the citizenry on board, I suppose. Really, I guess, to make it look like not a loss. Then we'll move across to the Kherson region, where Ukrainian forces continue precision strikes on the occupied town of Alensky. So that's really pretty much just opposite Kherson city itself. Oh, and then also locals reported that 2 S-300 air defense systems are moving from occupied Novozarivka, and that is right here, to Hola Pristan, right there. So these are the Russian S-300 air defense systems, of course in the occupied region there, which to me feels like Russian forces didn't do any risk assessment or due diligence on that operational change, as that would be a mistake. It would be shortly thereafter identified by a Ukrainian drone. Coordinates then would be sent back to command, making it one big Russian exercise in futility after a say a HIMARS strike. It wouldn't even need a HARM missile. These are the anti-radar / anti-radiation missiles, technically they're called. But yeah, it would just be a stationary position that would be quite easily able to be taken out. In fact, Ukraine is quite good at artillery strikes in terms of accuracy for them. So there's even also a chance that Ukrainian artillery could take it out as well. Oh, and since we're in this location, I'll also mention power has been restored for critical infrastructure in the north bank of the Kherson Oblast here. So yeah, restored for the critical infrastructure. In fact, that happened yesterday, over 24 hours ago. But as of today, 17% of households on the North Bank have been reconnected to mains power, with more to be connected soon as well. Then moving across to some news for the day. So the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees have reported that 4.7 million Ukrainian civilians have received temporary protected visa status throughout Europe. And the highest number of Ukrainian refugees can be found in Poland, Germany, and the Czech Republic at the moment. But even further to that, there are 7.8 million Ukrainian refugees currently in Europe, which actually makes it the largest refugee crisis in modern history since World War II. In fact, it's arguably as big as the World War I refugee crisis, but instead occurring over the space of half a decade, it's only been 9 months. Of course, the length of this war. Then in some other news, in a recent address from Ukrainian President Zelensky, he stated that it's likely to be a difficult week ahead with more Russian missile strikes on Ukrainian infrastructure. And I'll add a little further context to this, because due to the increasing volume of air defenses in Ukraine, Russia has to launch quite a large barrage of missile strikes, for example 100 or more, in order to attempt to overwhelm Ukrainians' air defenses sufficiently. And this is really a difficult feat for Russia to do. So they don't perform large missile strikes every day due to depletion of missile stocks and also logistical preparations for the next barrage of missile strikes to take place as well. All of that needs to be coordinated. So Russia hopes to perform one of these large missile strikes about every 1 or 2 weeks now. But I wanted to look into this from contrasting it to the past. So, in fact, Russia's ability to successfully hit military targets as of November 28th sits at about 3%. So, hitting military targets at a success rate of 3% only. Now, that's a surprisingly low number, but back in June, when it was currently sitting at 9%, I was even more surprised then. I would have thought it would have been a 50, 60 upwards percent at that time. Now, it is true to say there have been some farms, holes in the ground, patches of grass, civilian buildings, residential areas that have been hit, but we're talking about actual military targets, and the numbers are just dropping like crazy. Then in some other news, a Russian or a series of Russian AN-124 cargo planes have been spotted traveling to China, presumably to pick up supplies for their war in Ukraine. However, a Chinese source said Russia was being supplied items only like clothing, body armor, and helmets. And if that is in fact true, they're probably getting more airsoft vests. This has happened before, and more cheap Chinese useless helmets. So that would be the highest hope in a way, as opposed to offensive weaponry. And Russia does not want to be seen supporting China doesn't want to be seen supporting Russia's aggression in Ukraine. And then a bit of a Russian military mobilization blunder. So this video is a little bit different, but in this video, basically it's being said here that all of the men in this family are going to or have gone to war. The youngest son of the family received a summons to go to war initially, and the wives and mothers here said that they were really quite a patriotic family. So the father and the older brother decided to take up arms and join the son as volunteers in the special military operation, as Russia likes to still call it mostly. But probably the most bizarre part is that both the mothers and wives here, these two, seem pretty happy, pretty chipper, as I would say with my dialect, expecting their family to come home victoriously. Both wives and mothers here, they said they don't work, and they said their house's mortgage repayments are on a temporary hold until 2023, which is really just around the corner now. And so they expect the breadwinner men of the family to come back home soon. But I'm just speechless here because I've seen just the same thing happen over and over. I know how this story ends. Families like these are going to get quite the rude awakening when they realize, along with many other Russian families, that the Russian government never had their best interests at heart ever in the first place. So that Russian patriotism will eventually turn into some type of anti-governmental sentiment, eventually, something like that. And then in a little bit of funny or really lighter news to round it off with, not even really news, more of a happening on the front lines. So I've got this video footage of the Ukrainian armed forces at the front lines, enjoying the snow, running around. The dogs are having a bit of fun there too. Basically a bit of a snowball fight. So that's always good to see. This guy's got his shirt off. I spoke a bit on hypothermia yesterday, what that's all about. You can't really exist outside and survive in degrees below about 50 degrees Fahrenheit or 10 degrees Celsius. But no doubt this guy would have come from a beneath ground dugout that's actually quite well warmed. So he had really high body temperature, probably in a way cooling down, running around, keeping warm for the bit. But yeah, it's a fun time outside in the cold, as opposed to what most frontliners on the Russian side have to deal with, just stuck in a ditch, really a trench, being constantly exposed to the elements and not having any fun at all. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks for watching. Please leave a comment, subscribe, hit that like button. Thanks again for all the support. Can't tell you how much it all means to me as I take my time every day to do these vids. And I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.